Brian Wilson, Mary Catherine Ham, Brian Neiman, today's newsmakers, and you. The Morning Majority, 630.
WMAL.
It is 7:37, and in these unsure economic times, I like to turn to a guy who's going to give it to me straight from the shoulder. A man's going to tell me just how the cow ate the cabbage, and that man I often find is one Stuart Varney of your Fox Business Network, who joins us on the phone now. Good morning to you, Stuart.
Good morning to you, Brian.
Hey, listen, last Friday, the jobless numbers landed with an ugly thud. The jobless rate going up to 9.2%. That came just before this big Sunday meeting in which Democrats proposed one idea, Republicans pushed another. Republicans walked away from the Democratic proposal because it included about $1 trillion in tax increases. They come back to the table tomorrow. The president's going to address the nation at 11. What's going to happen, Stuart?
I think those jobs numbers actually pushed the two sides farther apart because they portrayed such a grim picture of the economy as it now stands. The Republicans were able to seize on those numbers and say, look, you cannot raise taxes in this economic situation. And the administration was able to say, you must spend more because we need jobs to be created with this lousy economic situation. And that's why that pushed the two sides further apart. Essentially, Republicans want no tax increases. They stood firm on that. And the administration wants to spend a little bit more on infrastructure and on education. They stood firm on that. And so they're still miles apart.
I don't see how there's going to be a deal, Stuart. I mean, to me, the Republicans they're hearing from their constituents, their base, and essentially saying, hey, we put you in power in the House because we don't want you to raise taxes. We want you to cut spending. And they're hearing that. Democrats, on the other hand, they're hearing, you know what? The rich need to pay more. Tax increases are part of the deal. We have to have tax increases, and you're not touching Medicare, and you're not touching Social Security. And I think they're both galvanized by, their constituents. And I just don't see how there could be a deal if they both believe that they're absolutely right and they don't want to tick off their base.
I agree with you, Brian. How do they, either side, get away from the base? And they are miles apart as we speak. I think that both sides are doing a huge political calculation. Who gets the blame if, come August the 2nd, one government check does not go out?
Right.
Who gets the blame for that? Because if we get down to August the 2nd, the administration has to decide who gets paid and who doesn't, and who gets the blame and who doesn't. I think that's where we are.
Well, Stuart, here's what ticks me off about the discussion of the spending part of this, is that the spending, they're saying, we can't cut spending in this drastic way. Well, you're not actually cutting spending, you're cutting the rate of growth of spending. So you're always spending more money. And Democrats argue that this is going to be some huge gash in the economy if you cut all this money out of it.
Well, also, look at the time frame. I believe that the president's proposal is cut $4 trillion in 12 years. But if you look at it over 10 years, you're only cutting $2.5 trillion, which means...
We promise we'll get to those other two.
Exactly. I mean, isn't that a hugely backloaded spending cut a decade from now? I mean, can you really trust that? That's pure nonsense, isn't it?
You can't trust anything over 2 years, really, for the most part.
I'm not so sure I could trust 2 years.
Yeah, okay.
I need it up front.
Yeah, well, maybe it's got to be this year or at the most 2 years. But yeah, I mean, the 10 year down the line. But let me ask you this, because, we have you on a regular basis, and you seem to be more concerned than other people. Although I've read some people saying, hey, you don't really want to mess around with this. Nobody really knows the extent of problems that we could have after August 2nd. Remember we went through this with TARP, and I was a supporter of TARP. I thought it needed to be done. Really thought the whole economic system could come to a grinding halt if we didn't get that. Do you feel that could happen on August 3rd or August 4th? I mean, could we really have financial Armageddon here if we don't raise the debt ceiling?
I'm with you, Brian. I think it could be a replay of TARP. If you remember, in late September of 2008, Congress debated a $700 billion Wall Street rescue plan, and at first it was rejected. It was voted down. There was panic. The Dow Jones average lost about 1,000 points, I think, in 5 or 6 days. That plan was resubmitted to Congress, and it passed. You could see a somewhat similar situation arise now, because the great unknown in this is, as soon as that one government check does not go out, and that is technically a default. That's a very technical use of the word default, but it's there. As soon as that happens, we don't know what the market reaction is going to be. We do not know that. We can believe that the market goes down, that interest rates go up. We may think that, but we don't know exactly what's going to happen. But I think we're going to find out. I think it's going to come down to that level.
Two questions for you, Stuart. We haven't had Wall Street's been closed since this thing fell apart on Sunday. How do you think the street's going to react? And what do you think the president might say when he addresses reporters this morning at about 11 o'clock?
You're going to see a big drop for the stock market when it opens in a couple of hours, probably 100 points down for the Dow Industrials, and that's because of the breakdown in our debt talks and because the contagion in Europe has now spread to Italy, which is the third largest economy in the Eurozone, and you start messing with the third largest economy, you got a real problem. So it's debt that dominates the market this morning. What the president will say at 11 o'clock, I do not know. I suspect it will be a heavy political message. He may come out swinging against the Republicans and demanding tax increases so that students and the elderly and medical care does not get hurt. I mean, that's what he's done in the past. He may do it again.
That's
I really
the thing
don't.
He does.
I think he loses if he makes that argument again. I don't think many Americans, Stuart, believe that they are undertaxed.
I'm not so sure you're right, Brian. I think class warfare is front and center at this moment, and I think a large number of Americans do believe that if the rich paid a little bit more, we could get out of this mess. That's not the case, but I think that's what a lot of people believe, and the president may be playing a successful class warfare political game.
Stuart, what's the deal with Tim Geithner? He is going, he's not going, the entire sort of economic brain trust that has brought us to this wonderful place has imploded at this point. What's his deal?
I'm glad you asked because I'd love to say something about Tim Geithner. What he said over the weekend was absolutely ridiculous. He blamed the current weakness in the economy on the weather, Japan, and George Bush, in that order. Have you ever heard such nonsense in all your life? President Obama and Mr. Geithner own the current state of the economy. It is their policies which have brought us to this impasse. And to blame Bush 2.5 years into the Obama administration is pure nonsense.
Yeah, and he was head of the Federal Reserve New York during the Bush administration,
He was the head of the New York Fed.
New York Fed, right.
That's correct.
So,
he helped steer TARP, as a matter of fact,
he did.
which I'm with you, Brian. I agreed with. I've lost a lot of conservative friends because of this, but I agreed with TARP. I think the banks are special. I think they had to be bailed out. I think they had to be.
Right.
As I say, I've lost a few friends on that one.
They're the blood of the economy. We have to have it.
You're still my friend, Stuart. Always will
I like
be.
you, Brian.
All right, Stu. Good to talk to you as always. We'll be watching this morning, 9:20.